Welcome to the Operation Bohica podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the complicated legacy of Hulk Hogan. I uh, I first saw Hulk Hogan around 1984 ish. Um, right about I had been watching WWF wrestling for a couple of years already. I was living in New York City at the time, and I remember seeing the advertisement for the match that was coming up between the immortal Hulk Hogan, the incredible Hulk Hogan, as he was known at the time, and he was going to be challenging the Iron Sheik for the then World Wrestling Federation title, a title that the Iron Sheik had won from uh, Bob Backlund, who had been champion for about a 5 year uh, time frame. In those days, you had the World Wrestling Federation running out of New York. You had the National Wrestling Alliance running out of the Carolinas and the Georgia, especially in Atlanta, Georgia. You had the AWA, which is where Hulk Hogan had come from, run by Vern Gagne in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. They were in that area in Chicago and so on. Then you had World Class Championship Wrestling, which was, man, that was phenomenal with Fritz Von Erich and the Von Erichs and the Fabulous Freebirds, uh, Iceman King Parsons, The Missing Link, Gino Hernandez, and many others. So, right, before, like I said before, I've been watching WWF for a couple of years. I remember Bob Backlund, the Wild Samoans, Chief Jay Strongbow, Tony Garea, and the guy that was my favorite at that particular time was Superfly Jimmy Snuka. So, fast forward to 1984, Hulk Hogan pins the Iron Sheik. Oh, I can't forget about Sergeant Slaughter, who I hated when he was a bad guy. He was the first bad guy I really disliked back then. So again, fast forward to January of 1984, and Hulk Hogan wins the WWF title off the Iron Sheik, and then slowly but surely you see a complete evolution in the world of professional wrestling, and that evolution to what we know today was spearheaded by Vince McMahon Jr., who is the Vince McMahon we know now. And he needed a guy to be the star of that movement. And no ifs and buts about it, he got it right when he picked Hulk Hogan to become that star. Hulk Hogan, a couple of years earlier, was in Rocky 3 as Thunder Lips. I remember watching that on network TV. No, excuse me. I remember watching it on HBO when Rocky 3 premiered on HBO, and I was like, man, look at this guy. This guy is humongous, and he's throwing Rocky Balboa here, there, and everywhere. And that was my initial introduction to Hulk Hogan. You fast forward to 1985, and that's when the first WrestleMania was about to take place. And I remember there was that scene where they were in the ring. It was Hulk, Mr. T, Roddy Piper, one of the greatest heels ever. Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, another one of the great heels ever. You had Ace Cowboy Bob Orton. And if I remember correctly, there was some painting, and that's kind of how they built up that match to the first WrestleMania. I was about 9 years old, and I mean, I'm like, wow, they made it so believable. That's the thing about what they did. They just made it so believable, and those guys at that particular time were larger than life. And of course, the 80s a completely different time than what we live in now. You only had what, three, four channels on VHF, and then the UHF. If you had the TVs of that time, you had the knob on the top and the knob on the bottom, and then you had to use metal coat hangers to be able to get signal for some of the programming. It was a The 80s were a different time. They were absolutely. And so then you had the first WrestleMania, and with all the celebrities, you had Liberace, Billy Martin, you had Cyndi Lauper, you had you had Muhammad Ali at the first WrestleMania. And so that's kind of where WWF started really separating themselves from the NWA and the AWA and World Class Championship Wrestling, because they were going mainstream. They were on the late night talk show circuit with they were on Donahue back then. They were on the Johnny Carson show back then. And Hulk Hogan was the guy he was everywhere. And I mean everywhere. He was in magazines. He was in newspapers when newspapers were the thing of the day. And you go into 1986. By this point, WrestleMania one was such a success. You had WrestleMania two, which was kind of but you had the rivalry with Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff in the year, excuse me, between WrestleMania's one and WrestleMania two. Mr. Wonderful became a good guy, and he had a heck of a feud with Roddy Piper. And so him and Hulk Hogan were tag team partners for a little bit. And man, I remember like it was yesterday, July of 1986. You could see that there was tension between them. So Mr. Wonderful is like, "Hey, why didn't you answer my call?" And Hulk Hogan's like, "Man, I was on the squat rack, and when I was done, that's when I picked up the phone, and you weren't there." And I mean, they set up that heel turn so beautifully. So they're out there, Hogan and Orndorff against King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd. Eventually, everything kind of fell into place, and then Mr. Wonderful kind of saved Hogan. Then he gave him the clothesline. Then he gave him the pile driver. The heel turn was complete for Mr. Wonderful. It was great stuff, man. Nothing but fantastic memories. Fast forward to, I think, the moment where professional wrestling, I think, officially became mainstream, and that was 1987, and the build up to WrestleMania 3. You had Andre the Giant, even though he was not the prime Andre the Giant that people remember from the 70s. His name was still and still is an iconic name. So I remember what I was like 11 years old, and I remember I remember him going into Piper's Pit. He had Bobby the Brain Heenan with him, and Hulk Hogan's like, "What are you doing? Why are you aligning with him?" They set that up incredibly well. And so Andre turns on Hulk Hogan, and then he challenges him for the title at WrestleMania, and the build up to that was amazing, especially in 1987. You have to understand, for anybody watching that was not alive in '87 or is too young to remember. Again, a whole different world. You didn't have cell phones like you have now. You don't have laptops. You didn't have 8,000 channels. You didn't have Peacock. You didn't have Hulu. You didn't have Netflix. You had Channel 2, Channel 4, and Channel 7, if you were lucky. Channel 11 as well. If you had cable, you had some more options. If you had HBO and MTV when MTV showed videos and VH1, but you really didn't have anything at the level as far as television programming that you have now. So there was only so much that you were going to watch, and professional wrestling for me was the thing to watch. And I can't even begin to explain what a big deal WrestleMania 3 was in 1987, especially as an 11-year-old. When I would go to school, that was all we talked about. WrestleMania 3, it's coming. Here it is. Who's going to win? Is it going to be Andre? Is it going to be Hulk Hogan? Of course, you had a couple other matches, in particular the Macho Man Randy Savage, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat match. That was the other one that I was really paying attention to. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, another one of my heroes. But still, I was still a Hulkamaniac. And March 29th of '87 arrived. I There was nowhere that I could watch it on closed circuit TV. Obviously, we didn't have the money to buy closed circuit TV, and again, they didn't have pay-per-view back then. So the worst part was you had to wait until the following week until the following weekend to find out who won the matches. Same thing with the other two WrestleManias. You had to wait. If WrestleMania was on a Sunday, you had to wait until the following Saturday to find out who won the matches. So that week between March the 29th up until the next week, man, that was probably the longest week of my life because I want to know if Hulk was still champ, if Ricky Steamboat had beat Macho Man, and of course the other plethora of matches. So I think I had a classmate that if I remember correctly, he was kind of he kind of somehow figured out that Hogan won and what have you. But still, I literally waited the whole week to see who won, and Hulk Hogan comes out on top, and that was the height of Hulkamania. And I'll say this: in the '80s, you had Michael Jackson, you had Whitney Houston, you had Madonna, you had Michael Jordan, obviously, you had Magic, you had Bird, you had Wayne Gretzky, you had Joe Montana. I'll say this: I don't think that Hulk Hogan was the top star, but he was up there, and nobody can dispute that. If you lived in the '80s, even if you didn't give a horse's ass about professional wrestling, if you lived in the '80s, especially from '85 on down, you may not have known who the Junkyard Dog was. You may not have known who Macho Man Randy Savage was. You may not have known who King Kong Bundy was. You may not even know who Ric Flair was, but you knew who Hulk Hogan was. And that's part of that's, you cannot question that part of his legacy. Uh, and Hulk Hogan's legacy kind of takes many different forms. You have the Hulk Hogan of the '80s, the Hulk Hogan of the '90s, which we're going to get into, and then the Hulk Hogan outside of wrestling. Uh, Fast forward to '88, the whole two referee thing on Saturday night's main event where he loses the title. 33 million people watch that. What does that tell you about Hulkamania? 33 million people watched it on network television in 1988. Those were staggering numbers for that time. And then you go into 1989. I believe Hulk Hogan left for a while to film No Holds Barred, which, that movie was trash, but whatever. Macho Man's the champion. Hulk comes back. The story that they built for WrestleMania 5, great story. Hulk Hogan lusting for Macho Man's wife, Elizabeth, and the dynamics that played into that. And now, all these years later, you hear about some of the stuff that was going on backstage in real life and the real life tension between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Back in 1989, I thought Randy Savage was the bad guy and all that. All these years later, now as an adult, I see that Randy Savage was the good guy, and Hulk Hogan was the bad guy. So Hulk Hogan gets the title, and then fast forward to another event that was, I mean, it was. I wouldn't put it quite at the level of WrestleMania 3 with Andre the Giant, but it was very close, and that was 1990 WrestleMania 6. Hulk Hogan is the world champion. The Ultimate Warrior is the latest challenge, and he is the Intercontinental Champion at the time. And both of them were baby faces, basically good guys. What a build up to that match! And I remember going to school again, just like WrestleMania 3. It wasn't nobody talking about, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Who gives a shit? Are you getting straight A's in school? Man, who gives a shit? What do you think is going to happen with Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior? Da, 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 da. And conversations started going, and that was all we talked about. I've said jokingly, COVID divided the world in 2020, but I don't think COVID divided the world like the world was divided in 1990 when Hulk Hogan took on Ultimate Warrior. I mean, it was 50-50 the Ultimate Warrior fans, it was 50-50 Hulk Hogan fans. I admit I was rooting for the Ultimate Warrior. By that point, I was kind of starting to, Hulk Hogan's kind of ran its course. Time for somebody new, things like that. I remember WrestleMania was on one of the TV stations, but it was for those of you that remember, if you wanted to buy something on pay per view, it was on the TV, but it was scrambled, so you could only see like very tiny tiny segments of it, maybe a second, and then it would scramble for like 10, 15 minutes, and you're sitting there trying to pick up on what was going on. So I did catch a little bit of it at the end, and it looked like Ultimate Warrior had won. And again, it was the same situation. You had to wait another week to see and to find out who won the matches. And then after that, really, there was a time frame there where I think that was the beginning of the end of kind of that red and yellow Hulkamania movement. And slowly but surely, you know, Hulk kind of lost popularity. Yeah, he won the title against Sergeant Slaughter the next year, and that was bouncing off of the Iraq War in 1991. But after that, it's slow. It was a very slow uh, fading out process of Hulk Hogan until ultimately he left uh, WWF back in '93. So in 1994, he goes to what is now um, WCW, which was the NWA for many years. So he had his battles with the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Quite frankly, at that particular time, 1994 to '96, pro wrestling to me, was not as interesting as it once had been. Obviously, I had moved into adulthood as well, so uh, had other things going on in my life at that point. But it just didn't, wrestling didn't seem to have that flavor, that hook that it had in the '80s. So you fast forward to June of '96. The NWO was about to form. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash had jumped from WWF to WCW. They start talking about there's a third man, there's a third man. So they have a match against Savage, Lex Luger, and Sting. Hulk Hogan comes out to apparently help Savage, Sting, and Luger. He goes to the corner, drops the leg drop on Randy Savage, and what happened afterward was incredible. The way that heel turn, by far the greatest heel turn in the history of wrestling. Fans were throwing trash in the ring, and the NWO started forming, and wrestling once again, because of that moment, wrestling became popular again, and that actually helped the WWF as well with the NWO. The WWF had to step up, and thankfully they did. That's when the Undertaker start taking off again. Then you had the emergence of Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret the Hitman Hart. Then The Rock came into the picture. And then you had some real competition between WWF and WCW. So if you were a wrestling fan, that was like a golden age from '96 to '01, where if you missed out on some good stuff from one, you had to tune into the other. So it was a real battle that WCW was winning for a while. But again, who spearheaded all that? It started with Hulk Hogan. That's his legacy, what he spearheaded. Um, then you fast forward to 2002, when WCW folded. Him and the NWO, they go to WWF, WWE, as it had become by then. Another great moment, another epic matchup in Toronto, WrestleMania 18 at the Sky Dome. I remember I was in the army stationed in Fort Sill, and the guys from the battery that I worked with, we hogged a couple of tables, and WrestleMania, that place was packed. This place called the Impact Zone. That place was packed, man. And we all wanted to see. I mean, you had some other great matches, no doubt about it. But the real main event was Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. I had a chance to watch that match yesterday, and it was like going back to 2002 all over again. And the crowd turned on The Rock, and they were cheering for Hulk Hogan. And good thing for them, they kind of improvised. So Rock kind of played the bad guy. Hulk played the good guy all over again. The Rock was about to pin him. He kicks out. Hogan starts hulking up, points at The Rock, hits him a couple of times, throws him on the ropes. hits him in the face with the leg, hits him with the platinum leg drop. The Rock kicks out, and that crowd was just, I mean, it was an incredible scene. One of the greatest matches in the history of wrestling. Then Hulk Hogan turns good, and then things just kind of start evolutionizing from there. What I will say is, I'll admit that Hulk Hogan was one of my childhood heroes, but I think one of the things that I understand now as an adult is, your heroes are going to let you down, just like friends let you down, just like family lets you down. That's just the reality. It ain't fair, but it is what it is. So Hulk Hogan did make some racist statements years ago, which he has apologized for. Whether the apologies were sincere or not, only he would know. I know in these last couple of days after he has passed away, there have been some African American wrestlers that have defended Hulk Hogan. Uh, I saw Devon Dudley say that Hulk Hogan uh, went to him and apologized personally. I know Teddy Long has said, another African American involved in wrestling. He said that Hulk Hogan was always good to him, was always respectful. There's been a couple of other wrestlers, a couple of other African American wrestlers that have said, "Hey, listen, he's gone now. There's no time for hate. Let's celebrate Hulk Hogan for what he has accomplished. We all make mistakes, so on and so forth." Uh, some people are not going to forgive, will never forgive Hogan. It is what it is. Um, there's been a couple other wrestlers like Booker T, who has stated that Hulk Hogan gave him and his brother the push, and that got them more TV time, and that basically got Harlem Heat over, and Harlem Heat became a great tag team, one of the great tag teams of all time. And they have said that it was because of Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan with yeah, there was a lot of backstage politicking, which I'm about to mention that. But in their case, the backstage politicking by Hulk Hogan did get them over. There are many negatives to Hulk Hogan apart from that video where he uttered the N word. There were some wrestlers whom were not happy with a lot of Hulk Hogan's politicking, who were, it could be professional jealousy as well, but they wanted his spot, and Hulk Hogan basically pushed them down, according to them. I know that there's been conflict with Ric Flair, even though now Ric Flair has stated that they had gotten past that and that they were very close friends. Ric Flair has stated when he almost died years ago, Hulk Hogan was there at his bedside to cheer him on and to support him. So I'm sure that whatever differences they had in the past, those differences you know, have been taken care of. I know he had some conflict with Bret the Hitman Hart. I know he had a lot of conflict with Randy Savage, both from a professional and personal perspective. In WrestleMania 9, at WrestleMania 9 in 93, if Hulk Hogan had a black eye, there's this urban legend that him and Randy Savage got into a fight backstage, and Randy Savage punched him and gave him a black eye. So, a lot of conflict with Randy Savage. Hulk Hogan also had a lot of conflict with the Ultimate Warrior, um, which they met face to face before Ultimate Warrior passed away, and they patched things up. And I'm sure there's probably many other wrestlers who Hulk Hogan has probably had some conflict with because of the politicking that goes on backstage. If you remember in 1997, Starcade 97, the buildup against with between him and Sting, the buildup was epic. The entrances were epic, and the match was shit. And a lot of people have blamed Hulk Hogan for basically sandbagging Sting, because that was the moment where Sting was supposed to get over and take WCW into to a new level. We don't know. Uh, again, Hulk Hogan's legacy will, because of those things, Hulk Hogan's legacy is a complicated one. On one hand, you have what I just mentioned, the racial comments. You have the issues with some of the people that he worked with. Some sandbagging and backstabbing and betrayal that he's been accused of, a lot of lying that maybe that he has said online, a lot of tall tales that he said, a lot of stories that he said about Andre and Randy and things like that, that maybe are not completely true. And Hulk Hogan probably spun it to make himself look good. I don't doubt that. Having said that, I have to take a look at Hulk Hogan and say that right now you have WWE's boom, another boom period, and it all started in 1984 with Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon and him beating the Sheik and transitioning into WrestleMania 1, like I had said, and into WrestleMania 3 and WrestleMania 6. If it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, you know, WWE is not what it is today, and that includes his involvement in WCW and his turning heel in 1996. That I think that made WWF had to step up and say, okay, we need to better our product. And because of that, that's where the emergence of Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and Triple H. So indirectly, that made WWF better, and it segued into what WWF is now. So if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, you probably don't have Stone Cold Steve Austin. You probably don't have The Rock. You probably don't have Roman Reigns nowadays. You probably don't have Kurt Angle. You probably don't have Seth Rollins. You don't have CM Punk. You the way it is now. Now you can say that if it wasn't for Gorgeous George, if it wasn't for Bruno Sammartino, if it wasn't for Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, Dusty Rhodes, guys like that, there'd be no Hulk Hogan, superstar Billy Graham, whom when he was living, he accused Hulk Hogan of stealing his gimmick. But in wrestling, no gimmick is ever really truly original. You just take it and you just kind of evolve it. Nature Boy Ric Flair took the gimmick of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers and evolved it. You can say Hulk Hogan took superstar Billy Graham's gimmick and evolved it. That's just kind of how wrestling goes. But those are my thoughts on Hulk Hogan. You know, again, he may not have been the greatest person outside of wrestling. You hear with him, you hear great stories now, and you hear horror stories as well. You heard those horror stories when he was alive. You heard great stories about him, both professionally and personally. But you cannot take anything away from what he contributed to professional wrestling. Professional wrestling does not go mainstream if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan. Um, you could have put superstar Billy Graham in that spot. Who knows if it would have took off the way it did? You could have put, who the Junkyard Dog or Superfly Jimmy Snuka or Sergeant Slaughter. Do you really think that those guys would have been able to take wrestling mainstream the way Hulk Hogan did? I think not. But that is the legacy, a complicated legacy, the complicated legacy of Hulk Hogan.